The small creature pressed itself against the cold metal wall of the waste processing station, trying to stay out of sight. Velmorin's thin arms shook as he carried the heavy container of toxic materials down the narrow corridor. His translucent skin glowed pale blue in the dim light, and his large dark eyes watered from the chemical fumes. "Move faster, Bug," growled the station supervisor, a massive reptilian being who towered over the tiny worker. "These pipes won't clean themselves." Velmorin nodded quickly and hurried along, his bare feet making soft sounds on the metal floor. He had been working on this space station for 12 years now, ever since he was old enough to hold cleaning tools. Like all Kethmori, he was considered good for nothing except the jobs that other species refused to do. The waste processing center was deep in the station's belly, where the air was thick and poisonous. Only his people could survive here for long periods. Their bodies had adapted over generations of being forced into the worst jobs in the galaxy. But survival and living were two different things. "Elder Velmorin," whispered a young voice behind him. He turned to see Kira, barely 15 years old, struggling with a container twice her size. Her skin was even paler than usual, and she moved slowly like she was in pain. "Child, you should rest," he said softly in their native language. "Cannot rest," she replied, coughing. "The overseers say we must finish this section before the night cycle, or they will cut our food again." Velmorin felt his heart break a little more. 3 months ago, the station had reduced their food portions by half. Last month, they had moved the Kethmori workers to even smaller living spaces. The excuse was always the same: budget cuts, efficiency improvements, better use of resources. But everyone knew the truth. The Kethmori were not considered real people by the rest of the galaxy. He helped Kira with her load, and they worked in silence for a while. Other Kethmori moved through the corridors like ghosts, their heads down, their movements careful and quiet. They had learned long ago that being noticed usually meant trouble. As they worked, Velmorin thought about home. Veltar was a small world in a forgotten corner of space. It had no precious metals, no rare crystals, no strategic value that the great powers wanted. His people had developed amazing biotechnology over thousands of years. They could grow living computers and ships that healed themselves, but the Galactic Council had dismissed their achievements as primitive and useless. "Elder," Kira whispered urgently. "Someone is coming." Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. Velmorin recognized the sound immediately. Council representative Zarthok was making one of his rare visits to the lower levels. The tall, scaled being wore expensive robes and carried himself like he owned the universe. "Representative," Velmorin said, bowing low as the alien approached. "How may we serve you?" Zarthok barely looked at him. "The Council has received your people's transmissions about the approaching Zephyrian fleet." Velmorin's hearts began to beat faster. For months they had been sending desperate messages to the Galactic Council, begging for protection. The Zephyrians were sweeping through their sector of space, enslaving or killing every species they considered weak. Hundreds of worlds had already fallen. "Please, honored representative," Velmorin said, his voice trembling. "The Zephyrian ships grow closer to our homeworld each day. We have women and children there, elders who cannot fight. We need the Council's protection." Zarthok made a sound that might have been laughter. "Protection? Your species contributes nothing to galactic civilization. You have no resources we need, no skills we value, no strategic importance. The Council's military forces are needed elsewhere." "But we are people," Velmorin said quietly. "We have families, hopes, dreams. We have created beautiful things, solved problems in ways others cannot. Surely that means something." The representative's eyes turned cold. "You are waste processors and janitors. That is all you have ever been, and all you will ever be. The Council has more important matters to attend to than protecting useless species." He turned and walked away, his footsteps fading into the distance. Velmorin stood frozen in the corridor, feeling like his world had just collapsed. Around him, other Kethmori had heard the conversation. Some were crying silently. Others stared at the floor in defeat. Young Kira tugged at his sleeve, Elder, what will happen to us? He looked down at her innocent face and felt something break inside his chest. How could he tell her that they had been abandoned? That the great galactic civilization they had always respected and tried to serve had decided they were not worth saving? I do not know, child, he whispered. That night, Velmarine sat alone in his tiny quarters and composed another message to send home to Veltar. He told them to prepare for the worst, to hide what they could, to be ready to run if escape was possible, but he knew it was hopeless. The Kethmori had nowhere to go, no allies to call upon, no one who cared whether they lived or died. They were alone in an uncaring universe, and time was running out. Captain Lee Tae-ho gripped the armrests of his command chair as the ship shook violently. Warning lights flashed red across the bridge of the Star's Promise, and the smell of burning circuits filled the air. Engine status report, he called out, trying to keep his voice calm. Chief Engineer Park Ji-woo's face appeared on the main screen, sweat dripping down her forehead. Captain, we've lost the main drive completely. The backup systems are failing, too. We need to find somewhere to land for repairs, or we're going to be floating dead in space. Tae-ho studied the star charts on his screen. They were far from human space, exploring new trade routes through an unmapped sector. The nearest human colony was 3 weeks away, assuming their engines worked at all. There, said Navigation, Officer Kim So-ra pointing at her display. I'm detecting an inhabited system about 6 hours from here. The readings show advanced technology, but something strange about it. Strange how? The energy signatures don't match anything in our databases. It's like they're using completely different science than the rest of the galaxy. Tae-ho made his decision quickly. Set course for the inhabited world. Send a standard first contact message. Tell them we're having mechanical problems and request permission to approach for emergency repairs. The reply came back within an hour, transmitted in broken but understandable galactic standard language. The voice was soft and nervous. Nothing like the confident tones humans usually heard from advanced civilizations. Human ship, you may approach, our world. We are honored by your visit. Please land at the coordinates we are sending. We will try to help however we can. Something in that voice made Tae-ho frown. The being sounded almost frightened, like they expected to be punished for speaking. 6 hours later, the Star's Promise limped into orbit around a beautiful blue-green world. The cities below glowed with soft bioluminescent light instead of harsh, artificial illumination. Strange, organic-looking structures reached toward the sky like living trees. Captain, So-ra said with excitement in her voice, I'm reading the most amazing biosignatures down there. Their entire civilization seems to be grown rather than built. A small shuttle rose from the planet's surface to meet them. It looked more like a giant flower than a spacecraft, its petals opening and closing as it moved through space. When it docked with their ship, Tae-ho and his senior officers went to greet their visitors. The airlock opened, and 3 small figures stepped through. Tae-ho had to look down to see them properly. They were barely 4 feet tall, with thin, delicate bodies and skin so pale it was almost transparent. Their huge dark eyes seemed to take up half their faces, and they moved with careful, nervous gestures. The one in front bowed deeply, almost touching the floor with his head. Honored humans, he said in a whisper. I am Sil Andros, Chief Engineer of this facility. We are not worthy of your presence, but we will do everything we can to help repair your vessel. Medical Officer Choi Min-ho stepped forward and gently touched Sil Andros on the shoulder. Please don't bow like that. We're all equals here. We're just grateful you're willing to help strangers. Sil Andros looked up in complete shock, as if he had never heard such words before, his large eyes filled with tears. You speak to us as equals? He asked, his voice trembling. Of course we do, said So-ra, kneeling down to be at eye level with the small being. Why wouldn't we? That's when Sil Andros began to weep openly. The other 2 Kethmori rushed to comfort him, but they were crying too. The humans looked at each other in confusion and concern. I'm sorry, Tae-ho said carefully. Have we said something wrong? Sil Andros shook his head, wiping his eyes with a thin hand. No, Captain. You have said something right. Something we have not heard in 300 years. No one speaks to the Kethmori as equals. We are the galaxy's waste collectors, the beings other species use for dangerous work and then forget about. That's terrible, Minho said with genuine anger in his voice. No intelligent species should be treated that way. As they walked through the Kethmori city, the human crew saw wonders that took their breath away. Buildings that grew from seeds and healed themselves when damaged. Computers made from living coral that could solve problems by thinking in ways no machine ever could. Transportation pods that were actually gentle creatures who enjoyed carrying passengers. This is incredible, Ji-Woo said, running her hands along a wall that pulsed with soft light. Your biotechnology is centuries ahead of anything we've seen. How could anyone call this primitive? Cilandros smiled sadly. The great powers of the galaxy only value metal and crystal technology. They say our living machines are weak and useless. That evening, as the Kethmori worked to repair the human ship using their amazing bioengineering skills, Cilandros told Tai-Ho about the approaching Zephyrian fleet. They destroy or enslave every species they consider inferior, he explained. They will be here soon, and the Galactic Council has refused to help us. We have sent so many messages, but no one cares what happens to the Kethmori. Tai-Ho felt anger burning in his chest. That's wrong, completely wrong. Captain, Minho said quietly. We can't just leave them to face this alone. Tai-Ho nodded, his mind already working. Sora, send a message back to Earth. Tell them we've found something the galaxy forgot. People worth saving. 3 weeks after Captain Lee Tai-Ho sent his message to Earth, the space around Veltar began to fill with ships. They came one by one at first, old cargo vessels, converted passenger liners, even some personal shuttles that had been modified for long-distance travel. None of them looked like proper warships, but they all carried the same thing. Humans who had volunteered to help. Colonel Yoon Jaemin was among the first to arrive. His transport ship Freedom's Call had been a mining vessel just months before, but now it carried 200 former soldiers and a cargo hold full of weapons. When he stepped onto Veltar's main orbital platform, Elder Velmorin was there to greet him. Colonel Yoon, the small Kethmori said, bowing low. We are grateful beyond words, but we do not understand. Why do your people come to die with us? Yoon knelt down to look Velmorin in the eyes. We're not here to die, Elder. We're here to live. All of us together. More ships arrived every day. Dr. Shin Haejin brought 3 medical vessels filled with supplies and volunteer nurses. Engineer Nam Wubin came with construction equipment and a plan to turn the Kethmori's orbital platforms into something that could fight back. Teacher Park Sun-young arrived with her entire family, saying that someone needed to help educate the Kethmori children, who had never been allowed to learn. The Kethmori watched in amazement as the humans worked alongside them without any sense of superiority. When Nam Wubin saw their biotechnology for the first time, he actually got down on his knees to study it. This is incredible, he said to Cilandros. These living computers can grow and adapt faster than anything we've ever built. Can you teach me how they work? Cilandros nearly fainted. No one had ever asked to learn from the Kethmori before. Working together, the humans and Kethmori began to transform Veltar's defenses. The orbital platforms that had once been simple trading posts grew thick biological armor that could heal itself. Weapon systems merged human engineering with Kethmori biotechnology, creating defenses that could learn and adapt to enemy attacks. Young Kira, the girl who had worked in the waste processing center, found herself helping human engineers install new systems. Her small hands could reach places the larger humans could not, and her natural understanding of biotechnology amazed her new friends. Kira, said technician Lee Min-soo, could you show me how to make this nerve cable connect properly? I keep getting it wrong. She smiled, something she had rarely done in her entire life, and demonstrated the technique. For the first time, someone valued her knowledge instead of just her ability to clean up messes. The work continued for weeks with more human volunteers arriving all the time, but everyone knew their time was running out. Scout ships reported that the Zephyrian fleet was moving closer, destroying everything in its path. Finally, The day came when the enemy appeared at the edge of the system. Admiral Zekthul stood on the bridge of his massive warship Death's Glory, studying the readings from Veltar with confusion. Instead of a helpless world ready for conquest, his sensors showed heavily defended orbital platforms and dozens of ships in defensive positions. "This is impossible," he growled to his second-in-command. Intelligence reports said this system was inhabited by weak creatures with no military capability. "Sir, we're detecting human energy signatures mixed with unknown biotechnology. It appears the humans have allied themselves with the local species." Zekthul's face twisted with rage. "Foolish humans. They will learn what happens to those who interfere with Zephyrian expansion." The battle began at dawn, Veltar time. The Zephyrian fleet moved forward in perfect formation, their weapons charging for what they expected to be an easy victory. But as soon as they came within range, the orbital platforms around the planet came alive. The living armor absorbed the first wave of enemy fire, and the biocomputers instantly analyzed the weapon signatures. Within minutes, the defensive systems had adapted, growing new protective layers that were specifically designed to resist Zephyrian technology. "Impossible," Zekthul roared as his most powerful weapons harmlessly splashed against the organic shields. "How are they adapting so quickly?" On Platform Alpha, Colonel Yoon coordinated the defense while Silandros managed the biotechnology systems. Human tactical knowledge combined with Kethemori adaptive technology created something neither species could have achieved alone. "Enemy cruiser moving to attack Vector 7, reported Communications Officer Kim So-ra. "Understood," replied Silandros, his thin fingers dancing over a living control panel. Growing countermeasures now. The platform's weapon systems literally grew new gun emplacements designed specifically to target that enemy ship. When they fired, the organic projectiles sought out weak points in the Zephyrian vessel's armor like living things. The battle raged for hours. The Zephyrians had superior numbers and firepower, but they had never faced an enemy that could adapt and evolve during combat. Every time they thought they had found a weakness, the defenders changed and grew stronger. As his flagship's shields failed under attack from weapons that seemed to anticipate his every move, Admiral Zekthul finally understood what he was facing. "Retreat," he ordered, his voice bitter with defeat. "All ships retreat immediately." For the first time in galactic history, a lesser species had not only survived an attack by a major power, they had won. The news traveled fast through the Yain, dark corners of the galaxy where the forgotten species lived. In the crystal mines of Altara Prime, a small creature named Veltari heard whispers from other workers about impossible things. Humans had helped the Kethmori fight back and win against the mighty Zephyrian fleet. "It cannot be true," said his friend Kolneri, her 6 arms still working to dig crystals from the hard rock walls. "The Nirvani have been slaves for 400 years. No one has ever helped us. No one ever will." But the whispers grew stronger each day. Secret messages began to reach the mining colonies carried by smugglers and traders who dealt in the hidden places of space. The messages all said the same thing. There was a species called humans who believed that all intelligent life deserved freedom and respect. On the research station Omega-7, a young Keltharan named Silmoth lay strapped to a medical table while alien doctors prepared to inject him with another experimental drug. His people had been used as test subjects for so long that most had forgotten they had ever been free. "Subject 4847 ready for procedure," announced the cold voice of Dr. Vextar, a tall being with too many eyes and no sense of mercy. But before the injection could begin, alarms started ringing throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red and announcements echoed through the corridors about unauthorized ships approaching. Ambassador Lim Da-un stood on the bridge of the converted transport ship New Hope, watching the research station grow larger on her screen. Behind her ship came 12 others, all filled with human volunteers who had heard about the Keltharan's suffering. "Research Station Omega-7, this is Ambassador Lim Da-un representing the Terran Republic and the Open Hand Initiative," she said into her communications device. "We demand the immediate release of all Keltharan subjects being held against their will." The reply came back quickly, filled with anger and disbelief. "This is Director Morthek. You have no authority here, human. Leave immediately or face the consequences." Diane smiled grimly. "We'll see about that." What happened next was not a battle in the traditional sense. The humans did not attack the station with weapons. Instead, they surrounded it and began broadcasting the truth to the entire galaxy. Dr. Bae-Yoon Young, who had come with medical equipment and a team of the best human doctors, used powerful transmitters to send evidence of the illegal experiments to every news network in known space. "The galaxy needs to see what has been happening here," she said as images of tortured Keltheran filled the broadcasts. "These are not test subjects. These are people with families, with dreams, with the right to live free from pain." Within hours, protests began on dozens of worlds. Species that had stayed silent for centuries suddenly found their voices. The images from Omega-7 showed them that they were not alone, that someone was finally willing to stand up for the forgotten. On the poor, industrial world of Kepler 442b, human activist Han Seok-jin watched the broadcast with tears in his eyes. He had come to this world to help free enslaved workers, but the job had seemed impossible. Now, seeing what was happening across the galaxy, he knew the time was right. "My friends," he said to a secret gathering of enslaved beings from 7 different species, "tonight we take back our freedom. The humans will stand with us, but we must be brave enough to stand up first." The uprising began at midnight, local time. It was not a violent revolution. Han Seok-jin had learned from human history that peaceful resistance was often more powerful than warfare. Instead of fighting, the enslaved workers simply stopped working. They gathered in the main squares of their cities and sang songs of freedom in their native languages. The factory owners called for security forces, but something unexpected happened. The guards, many of whom were from oppressed species themselves, began to lay down their weapons and join the protesters. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On mining worlds and research stations, in factories and waste processing centers, the forgotten species began to remember that they were people, not property. The Galactic Council met in emergency session as reports flooded in from across their territory. Council Chairman Vorthak's tentacles writhed with barely controlled fury as he read the latest updates. "These humans are destroying the natural order," he announced to the assembled representatives. "For thousands of years, our civilization has functioned on the principle that some species serve while others lead. They threaten everything we have built." Representative Zarthok, the same being who had dismissed the Kethmori's pleas for help, stood to speak. "The humans have no legal authority to interfere in our internal affairs. We should send the full council fleet to crush this rebellion before it spreads further." But other voices began to speak up. Some of the smaller council, members species that had never quite forgotten what it felt like to be powerless, started asking uncomfortable questions. "What if the humans are right?" asked Representative Silvani from the Centauri Union. "What if we have been wrong for all these centuries?" The debate raged for days while the revolution continued to spread. More human ships arrived at every trouble spot, not with weapons but with food, medicine, and most importantly, witnesses. They broadcast everything to the galaxy, making it impossible for the powerful to hide their crimes anymore. By the end of the month, the old order was cracking. The forgotten had found their voices, and they would not be silenced again. 5 years had passed since the first human ship limped into the Veltar system, and the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have imagined. Ambassador O Minjai stood in the observation deck of the great space station that now orbited the Kethmori homeworld, watching ships from 300 different species dock at the massive biological ports. She was an unusual ambassador for humanity. Born on Veltar to Kethmori parents who had died in the old waste processing centers, she had been adopted by Captain Lee Taeho and his wife when she was just a baby. Now 23 years old, she carried both the gentle wisdom of her birth people and the determined spirit of her human family. "The council shuttle is requesting permission to dock," announced Station Controller Silandros, the same engineer who had first greeted the humans years ago. He now wore the insignia of the Open Hand Initiative, and his once fearful voice carried confidence and pride. Permission granted, Minjai replied. Let's see what the mighty Galactic Council wants to offer us today. The Council's delegation was led by Chairman Vorthak himself, along with several other high-ranking representatives. They entered the station's main conference room with the stiff formality that had ruled galactic politics for thousands of years, but their eyes showed uncertainty and even fear. Ambassador O, Vorthak began, his tentacles coiling nervously. The Galactic Council wishes to extend an offer of full membership to humanity, with all the rights and privileges that such status provides. Around the conference table sat representatives from dozens of species that had never been allowed in council chambers before. Former slaves, experimental subjects, waste workers, and miners now held positions of respect and authority. They listened to the chairman's words with expressions ranging from amusement to disgust. Full membership, repeated Minjai slowly. How generous of you, Chairman. And what about them? She gestured to her companions around the table. The Council recognizes that certain adjustments may need to be made regarding the status of lesser species, Vorthak said carefully. We are prepared to discuss reforms. Elder Velmorin, now serving as the Kethmori representative to the Open Hand Initiative, laughed softly. It was a sound that would have been impossible to imagine from him 5 years ago, when he had cowered before council representatives. Reforms, he said gently. You mean you might consider treating us as something slightly better than garbage? Dr. Shin Hee-jin, who had become the head of medical services for the entire initiative, leaned forward. Chairman, let me be clear about something. We've spent 5 years building a new kind of civilization out here. We've proven that cooperation works better than domination. We've shown that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. She gestured toward the observation windows where ships of impossible beauty moved through space. The vessels were grown rather than built, combining Kethmori biotechnology with human engineering and the artistic sensibilities of dozens of other species. They looked more like living sculptures than machines. Look at what we've accomplished, Shin continued. Our medical technology has eliminated diseases that plagued the galaxy for centuries. Our ships can heal themselves and adapt to any environment. Our food production systems can feed billions without harming planets. We've done all this by working together as equals. Han Seok-jin, who now coordinated the initiative's efforts to free oppressed workers throughout the galaxy, stood up and walked to the windows. Do you see that ship docking at Port 7? That's the Freedom Song. It was grown in the living shipyards of New Kelthera, designed by former experimental subjects who were considered too stupid to think for themselves. The ship he pointed to was magnificent, a flowing, organic form that seemed to dance through space. Its hull shimmered with colors that shifted like a living rainbow, and its movements were so graceful they seemed like poetry. The crew of that ship includes beings from 47 different species, Han continued. They're bringing medical supplies to the Rigel colonies where a plague is threatening to wipe out 3 million people. The Council's official response to that crisis was to quarantine the entire sector and let everyone die. We chose to help. Colonel Yoon Jaemin, now the initiative's military coordinator, cleared his throat. Chairman, you should also know that 17 of your member worlds have officially requested to join the Open Hand Initiative, instead of remaining under Council authority. More requests arrive every day. Vorthak's tentacles writhed with frustration. This is impossible. The galaxy needs order, hierarchy, strong leadership from those capable of providing it. Minjai stood slowly and walked around the table until she was facing the chairman directly. Despite her small stature, she had inherited the delicate build of her Kethmori parents. Her presence filled the room. Chairman, she said quietly, humanity accepts your offer of council membership, but only under one condition. Every intelligent species in this galaxy gets a voice and a vote, or we all walk away together. The silence that followed was deafening. The council representatives looked at each other in shock and growing panic. They had expected to negotiate with the humans as one species among many. They had not expected to face a united front of hundreds of formerly powerless beings. You cannot be serious, sputtered Representative Zarthok. The galaxy would collapse into chaos. Oh, Minjai smiled. The same gentle expression her adoptive father had shown when he first met Silandros years ago. Chairman, we've spent 5 years proving that the galaxy works better when everyone has value. The age of the forgotten is over. Welcome to the new foundations.